Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am Ray Russell, and this week, guys, we go back one more time to Georgia Championship Wrestling. Going to go back to 1983, maybe 1984. Going to talk to Bob about a lot of the talent that came through the Georgia territory throughout his time there. But in order for us to get to those talents, we've got to bring the man back onto the show himself. Please welcome back Mr. Bob Roop.
Well, thank you, Ray. It's good to be back with you and with our listeners out there. Hello, folks. I hope everybody's well. I hope things are going well for you. Ray and I, before we got on the air, we were talking about, I've been under the weather a little bit. We were talking about how good it is to have good health. I'll spread that a little further. I hope that all of you out there listening, I hope you and your loved ones are all well, or if they're not, I'm sending all my hopes that they recover. I've got a sick boy. My youngest son has been real sick with the same lung problem I had, and he's not sick to the point of being hospitalized or anything, but you hear him coughing and struggling for breath and having a hard time sleeping. It's very distressing. So I hope if anybody out there that has that kind of thing going on with them, you have my best wishes for everybody to recover and get back to a healthy life.
Yeah, luckily for us, the spring has sprung and there's a lot more open air going on. We can open our doors and windows a little more now and circulate and things because, man, that was a rough winter here in this household. We had a lot of different things travel through here from the COVID to the flu and things of that nature. And I know it was going around. It was making the rounds pretty big this year. So hoping, the best for your family, Bob. And I'm glad to hear that you're doing a little better this week as well as, well, it's back to business, I suppose, as long as you're doing okay. And we're going to continue on talking Georgia and a lot of the talent that came through Georgia when you were there. And we covered some ground last week, but we've got so many more names, dozens more names to get through here. And I'm sure you'll have stories for some, maybe not all, but that's okay. That's why we're here. We're going to name drop them. And maybe some of these names, something will come to you by the next episode. So it doesn't hurt trying, right?
Well, just reflecting on what I was just thinking, as you said that, one of the reasons that, and I've mentioned this before, one of the reasons I didn't get to know the boys better was that I traveled alone the latter part of my career. Now, not with Ole, when we went up to Ohio from Atlanta and spent that week up there in Ohio, Michigan, or West Virginia, wherever we were, I never had a car on my own. We always we needed to double up because, you don't want to, especially when we were renting those Lincolns, you wouldn't want to rent a Lincoln and just have one guy in it where you could have three more people in it, and not have to rent an extra vehicle or two.
Sure, certainly.
So, but on my own, in Georgia, for example, I think the only person I traveled with to any of those towns was Ole. Most of the time I was always running the shows down there. So I would travel by myself. And in a way, it was because I was management. But in another way, too, I had a small car. I had a little Datsun. And you couldn't get a pro wrestler in the back seat, I don't think, unless you shoved him in there and had him lay down. But
I'd like to see Bundy in there. That would have been fun.
Oh, my God. But in the cars is where you get a chance to know guys.
Right.
Because, they tell stories and things happen, like Orndorff and Atlas, for example.
Sure.
Tony Atlas having that fight and things. I mean, that story came because they were riding together. Those things happen. And so some of the reason I don't have more information about some of the guys that, even though I might have been in a territory with them for, a year or two, I don't have more stories about them. I wasn't able to personalize the relationship. I was management and they were labor. I learned early on you can't be too friendly with labor if you're management because especially guys you might have to fire. And also sometimes guys think it's okay to take liberties if you're friends with them.
Right.
And
that goes on in any walk of life. That's not just pro wrestling. That's any type of a management job dealing with other employees. Hey, I thought we were friends. We went out and had beers the other day. Why are you doing this to me, Bob? Kind of deal. So I totally get where you're coming from with that. And I also see why you can't really ride around with the boys a lot. We do talk about random, experiences that you had on the road, though, especially up in Ohio and Michigan and whatnot, hanging out or having family meet some of the wrestlers that stopped through to stay over, the Road Warriors, Jake Roberts, Ray Candy, things of that nature. So there were times that you were able to hang out with some of the boys, at some periods anyway, during this run in Georgia. And in fact, as we closed up last week, we told the story. Brian Blair helped us tell the story of Paul Orndorff and Tony Atlas and the case of the missing earlobe. So after the recording, I went back and I listened to Tony Atlas's version from a shoot interview online, and Tony doesn't tell it a whole lot different, other than, the earlobe didn't completely get spit on the ground. He said it was just dangling from his ear, but he admitted that they said, maybe we should go to the hospital and get you sewed up, right? And so for those of you who have never heard the story, go back and check it out from last week's episode. It's from Brian Blair's point of view. He was the driver in this fight between Orndorff and Tony Atlas, if you want to call it that. And Tony doesn't tell it a whole lot different, other than Paul sucker punched him, which led into him grabbing Paul and leading into the ear biting moment in the whole thing. But it was just fun to get another story like that. Boys being boys, and I emphasize the word boys there because, come on, guys, what are we doing? We're grown-ass men biting each other's ears and shit.
Something, I sound like I don't like Tony Atlas, and while my last memory of him was him encouraging Blackjack Mulligan to kill me, that's my last memory of actually ever being around him. It's in a memory file, but I've got all that stuff buried deep, because who wants to think about crap like that? But again, I want to make a point. If you get out of the car to fight, how in the hell can you get sucker punched? How can you get sucker punched?
I think Tony's version was he got punched while trying to get out of the car. It was the story. So, but I don't want to get too deep into his version or Brian's version and things, because that's where everybody decides they're going to change the story. And they, after this many years of telling the story, they remember it their way, and it is what it is. So somewhere in all of that, the truth lies. Tony Atlas did get his ear bit off. That part is true. So we know that much happened, which is the main part of the story. So yeah,
you can't change that part of the story, can you?
No, not really.
So,
there were witnesses, Brian Blair and Tommy Rich in the car as well. And Tommy just did not want any parties. Come on, guys, let's not do any of this. Tommy just was there to have a good time.
Tommy didn't want to have to get out and break it up.
I'm sure.
Those guys would break him into by accident. Just imagine trying to grab Tony Atlas and hold him back, if you're Tommy Rich or Orndorff,
Yeah, true. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I wish them all the best. I saw Tommy Rich last year at Waterloo. We had not gotten along very well for years, but for back when we were seeing, coming into contact, I don't think we even spoke. If I saw him at a convention or something like that. But after all these years, time has a way of healing things, and he was appropriately cordial, and I was too. But he actually worked a match, and I know he's got to be in his 60s anyway.
Yeah, he's still working, Bob. He's still working.
He looks good, That's his best way of making money, and if he can still do that, then fine. My hat's off to him.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the boys that didn't have anything else going for them, and these reunions and things, especially if they can make a few bucks, are a big deal. Autograph signings and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And the few that I'm invited to or asked to go, or paid to come to, I've only had a few. It's always been good to see the guys, and say hi to them. And usually, like even Kevin Sullivan. Kevin and I had all our troubles, and I think that I saw him a couple, I don't know, maybe it's been 3 summers in Charlotte, and I just walked up to him. He was sitting down because he had something was wrong with his legs or something.
Right.
And I just walked up to him and stuck my hand out. I said, how you doing? I said, what's the deal? I said, are we going to get along? Or now I think maybe within a day or two before that, I happened to see him on the internet call me, give me all kinds of crap about going opposition, and even saying that Ron Fuller didn't deserve to have anybody go opposition to him because he was one of the promoters that paid well. Which was just hilarious. But, I went up to Kevin and what are you going to do? You're going to, I didn't bear any grudges. He was still knocking me, but I didn't care. I mean, a lot of people listening to him might have said, well, who's this Bob Roop? Who's this Bob Roop this guy keeps talking about? I've never heard of him. So anyway,
he kept your name in the papers, Bob. That's all.
Yeah, actually, he was like a PR agent for me. It's like that Buddy Fuller said that time of the really horrible newspaper article in Atlanta. That time I went up there when I was brand new in the business.
Yeah, Roop the Dupe.
Yeah, Roop the Dupe. When I said, well, how can you guys, I mean, he said that article is absolutely horrible. I said, it makes you look like just total jerks and me look like an idiot. And Buddy just said, listen, we haven't had anything in the paper in 3 years. He said, any publicity in pro wrestling, any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, and it's subliminally bringing it back into people's minds. Maybe I haven't thought about wrestling in a while. Then I read that and I turned to my kid, hey, what you want to go to the matches this weekend? And
yeah, well, it's like a free advertisement. If for them to buy the space and run that article in the Atlanta Constitution on a sports page, probably would have cost them $500 or $1,000. I don't know.
Sure.
But I don't know who it was that said, look, I don't care if they're knocking me or praising me. As long as they're talking about me, I'm happy. Go. Yeah. Well,
we're going to talk about a bunch of names this week. Hopefully you have stories for at least a few of the names. If not, we'll come back to them later and we'll continue on because, again, like I said, it's a long list of talent, obviously, that comes through Georgia here over the 2.5 years or longer that you're here in the company working underneath Ole. And when you arrive in February, you're just there as a talent. You initially come in as a wrestler, a worker. You're just there to get paid for doing a job in the ring. And then by the summer, we're going to see you drastically drop back as a talent in the ring because you're going to start morphing into what would become known as an agent. You're working behind the scenes for Ole, helping out wherever you can, including cleaning shit out of cars, apparently. But
yes.
And driving a passed out Buzz Sawyer across state lines. I'm still not sure if that's kidnapping or not, but it's Buzz Sawyer, so I guess it's okay.
You just brought up a good point when you said cleaning shit out of cars.
Yeah.
Because all I cleaned out was chips and crap that barbecue that were like red and a bunch of beer poured on top of it and then ground in. All I had to clean out was that. It could have been worse. They could have both taken a crap in there too while they were passed out, and I would have had to clean that up too. So
that's terrible.
Actually, so what you're saying basically is my philosophy about life. It could always have been worse. So thank you for that.
True that. Uber driver without the tip is what that was there, unfortunately for Bob.
Yeah.
But so okay, well, I guess we'll jump into some names here. You just if I hit on anything that catches your ear, we'll get into a story. If not, we'll move along to the next guy.
Okay.
Let's start off with Larry Zbyszko. Larry comes through there while you're there. Did you ever have any encounters with Larry Zbyszko?
Not anything of note in terms of like negative. He was Larry was and is. I saw him not too long ago, 2 years ago. He was in Tampa for Barry Rhodes' Fan Fest. And,
right.
And he looked great. And he was always a good guy to be around. He was intelligent. Enjoyed talking to him. I liked him, and I respected his work. I think the original Zbyszko was a strong man, wasn't he? Wasn't he some kind of? And Larry was anything but he was believable. He was. I mean, we in the past we've gone through how could some people convince anybody that they could beat anybody, and it's just the power of television and being out there and watching it happen. If you could make it look believable, if you didn't have someone look like Wee Willie Wilson, overpower Andre the Giant, but you made it look believable. Well, people wanted to believe it, I guess, especially if it was heels getting beat. But Larry was a smooth worker, good talent. I never saw him have a bad match, frankly.
Larry was always solid. I think a lot of the fans' complaints on Larry, at least in his heel run throughout the 1980s, was that he loved to do the stalling bit. If the match went 10 minutes, you can better believe 8 minutes of it was Larry walking around, jaw-jacking at least on TV and things like that. But Larry was good for stalling a whole lot there in his heel run, but he was a hell. Once he got down to it, once the match actually started, I kid, guys, Larry was an amazing worker in the ring, a great talker, and he always came off, like you said, very intelligent in anything he had going on. So, but you were talking about the name Zbyszko, though. Yeah, that name goes back. I don't know if Bruno gave it to him. I'm sure Larry's explained it in the past, but obviously way back when there was Stanislav Zbyszko, there was Władek Zbyszko. But many years later, Larry comes to Bruno's home and he wants to train. And somehow Bruno takes a liking to Larry and he says, all right, I'll train you. And so Bruno helped in training and getting Larry broken in. Larry spent a lot of the 70s in New York, honing his craft as a babyface, but he really broke out when he turned on Bruno, turned on his teacher in 1980, and they wrestled each other in a cage in Shea Stadium. And then after that, Larry goes to Bruno. He's like, this is all I'm getting paid compared to what Bruno's getting paid. And Larry asks his mentor, what do you think I should do? And Bruno says, yeah, absolutely. Go ask the old man for more money. You deserve more money. Well, Larry went to the office and said, hey, I should be getting paid more. And Vince McMahon Sr. said, well, I don't think you need to work here anymore. And yeah, Larry was on his way out the door by that point. He would jump around. Luckily for him, anyway, he would go on to eventually marry Vern Gagne's daughter. And so Larry had a job there in the AWA for a while in the 1980s.
You talk about being connected. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, not just trained, but brought along. Bruno got into a program with him. I mean, Bruno worked against Larry Zbyszko in Shea Stadium.
Right.
And they were the main event. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, my next question is, how could Senior let him go so casually? Unless Larry made it a demand.
Yeah, I believe it was done in a demand sort of way that this is what I deserve and this is what I should be getting. I believe after working Bruno, they put Larry in there with Bob Backlund, who was the champion. So Larry had begun working title matches for the belt against Backlund at that point. And Larry thought, I deserve more. And he went, before he did anything, he even went and asked Bruno, what should I do? And Bruno was big on going and getting his fucking money, right? So Bruno's he told Larry, you go get your money. And Larry did not have the pull that Bruno had and found himself on the wrong end of that one. So
right. Bruno had, I don't know how many millions of Italians in the East Coast,
sure,
up and down the East Coast line that were fans of his just because for ethnic reasons. But Bruno had a lot of clout that way. He had a lot of, but I don't know. Now Bruno and Larry at Shea, they weren't the main event, right?
They were the main event, yeah.
They were the main event.
Yeah.
Who was the champion?
Bob Backlund, but he was in a tag match.
Okay. Because when you mentioned Backlund, I didn't know. I didn't know about the match at all. I thought maybe if it's when Bruno was the champion, then it's a big deal. It was still a big deal. Wrestling Bruno anywhere is a big deal,
right.
Especially the difference in build and size of those two guys. Bruno's about half again as bigger than Larry. Anyway, well, let's just put it this way. Larry obviously showed a lot of initiative by venturing into Bruno's house, home, wherever he went, and getting himself started.
Right.
And then having the, whatever you want to call it, the charm or the charisma or whatever to intrigue or interest Bruno. And I don't think Bruno would have just trained any schlub off the street.
No.
Obviously, Larry had to impress him somehow. So, and I'm not surprised. Again, Larry was the guy that you could talk about just about anything with him, and he would be able to talk about it. A lot of wrestlers, we all lived in the bubble, but some people never looked for any information outside the bubble. You weren't in the bubble when you were at home watching, if you wanted to watch the news or whatever, or read. I mean, I had a book with me probably 9 out of 10 times I was on the road. I had a book with me, reading about all kinds of different things to kind of, just keep an ear to what was going on in the world. But anyway, yeah, Larry did very well for, look at it, what was he, 5'10"? He did very, very well. He probably made 5 or 6 times the money I made. And that's what the business is all about. So, yeah, Larry was a good one.
Yeah,
He still is a Hulk.
I'd say Larry's biggest payday really came in WCW because he, once he retired, he became an announcer and he worked for the company for like 10 years as an announcer till the end, basically. So he got paid for quite a long period of time there, just, working as a color commentator in WCW throughout the entire 1990s. But, I saw Larry last year in Orlando at a deal. So, he was cool then, always wearing his Hawaiian shirts. So whatever you saw on the WCW TV is what you got with Larry Zbyszko in real life. He was himself is another thing. So, because he is a character at the end of the day.
Yes, he is. That's another thing. He got a good sense of humor too.
Yes.
He's kind of a wry sense of humor, witty. I should say something. I don't know if I've told our fans or our listeners this. I ask you questions that make it look like maybe I was in a coma for 10 years. but when I retired and started being Mr. Mom for my kids, I never watched wrestling. I didn't have anything against it, but I had been living that life for 20 years. And I was still involved with it a little bit when my kids were young. I ran a few shows and I had a ring. I had a little school going, like typical retired wrestler thing. As far as there was maybe 3 decades where I didn't have a clue what was going on with WWE or WWF. I wasn't watching it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things that you tell me about that I come across as not knowing about. I just want you and everybody out there to know it's not lack of memory on my part, although there are some memory problems here and there. I just never saw a lot of this stuff. I wouldn't watch it.
No, I totally get it. I get when people check out. You're not the first person. You're not the first wrestler that's checked out on the business for long periods of time or maybe permanently. And I don't blame people. Once they're out, that's your prerogative. Some people get into it. They don't get into it because they're they weren't 4 years old and watched it on TV and said, I got to do this and things of that nature. They came in and they loved it for what it was. But when they were done, they were done. And other people, like, say, an Al Madrill, or just, you hear the stories of Al Madrill out there, unfortunately, although I've heard he's come around in recent years, but there were long period of time where people found where Al worked and they said, hey, man, why don't you come to these conventions and things? And Al said, I don't know who you think I am, but I wasn't and it was, Al Madrill, and he's declining the fact that he was even a wrestler, that you have me mistaken with somebody else because he was so done with the wrestling business. Oh. Now, I've heard through some, people that, that might have changed in recent months or years or things like that. But that was how it was for years. And there's other guys like that too. They're done with it and they're over it. And I get that. And, there's other things going on in the world besides me clicking, the channel to watch wrestling every night, especially when, you weren't a fan per se to begin with, but being in the business and working in every aspect that you did in it, not just in the ring, but behind the scenes. I could see where that would be overload. And I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of done with this shit for a while.
Yeah, because a lot, all the years I was booker, I watched as many of the matches as I could every night. At least I tried to get in there before the finish to see how they built up to it. And if I could, I'd watch the whole match. I wanted to see what they were doing, especially if I had new guys. And another guy you remind me of with the Madrill story is Karl Kox, Killer Karl Kox. Mm-hmm. Karl was a buddy of mine. I really liked him. He was just really a good friend to me. I mean, he helped me in my career tremendously and was just a great guy. He was a great sense of humor, funny guy. And he was working as a sheriff's. He was working in a jail as a jailer. Right. And guys, I called him once and tried to get him to come to. I think it was maybe to the Gulf Coast, and because it wasn't that far away. And he wouldn't come. He didn't say, "Oh, F it" or whatever. He just wasn't interested, And I don't know why, but maybe whatever the reason, you have to respect it. And now with Karl, I had such respect for him. You talk about a guy who's a top talent and a tough son of a gun. But again, maybe Al Madrill had a bad experience of some kind that just turned him off to it. But hopefully with time, all that goes away. You forget, if you're fortunate, unless you dwell on it. If you want to dwell on your misery, well, you're just going to be miserable. But if you can forget stuff, then all of a sudden, it doesn't seem as bad, and times ease up for you. And I hope that happens for Al, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who knew him, worked with him, rode down the road with him, like to see him, just say hi and find out how he's been and all that. So come on, Al. Come on.
Come on. Come on down.
Yeah, come on down, man.
Oh, man. So when you first get here from February to June, you have a lot of random matches, but you're married more often than not to two guys on the road. You're beating Tito Santana. You're going over on Tito quite a bit. And Tito's biggest days are ahead of him. He'd already come out of a tag team title run with Ivan Putski in New York before this period, but Tito's going to go back and have a long run working for the WWF, a year-long feud over the Intercontinental title with Greg Valentine up there, another tag title run. So Tito's going to still go do a bunch more things in the big time. But right now here in 1983, he's putting you over because they're building you up. You've just arrived in town. But there's another guy you work quite a bit here, and I don't know if you're going to remember him because he was just kind of there, unfortunately, a lot of his career. He wrestled under the name Joe Lightfoot. He was a Native American character. His real name, Joe Ventura, came out of Montreal. Do you remember him at all?
Vaguely, yeah, vaguely. He was he went as an Indian, right?
Yes.
A Native American. Sorry, Native Americans. Pardon my cultural faux pas, but yeah, he was a good hand, and you could go out there and have a match with him, so that when you did beat him, it meant something. You could, you have guys that'll do a job for you, but sometimes if they're upset about it or whatever, even when you're trying to make them look good, they won't really cooperate much.
Right.
So in the end, you end up beating nobody, and it's just a waste of time. Everything out there.
Right.
If you drove 300 miles to get to the town, and then you had to go out and have a stinker of a match, and then you drive 300 miles back home. I mean, you talk about what a waste of time. It's a day in your life that's just basically been wasted. Joe was a good hand. He was a nice enough guy. I don't remember ever hearing about him getting a push anywhere, but
he would come in and he would get little mini pushes, even in Puerto Rico. He came through even Memphis at the tail end of his career, which was honestly just a couple years off from him. He was still fairly young, in his 30s. In 1985, he kind of falls off. He breaks in around 73, if I remember correctly. So he's about 10 years in the business by this point, but he never really hit it big, unfortunately. And he was kind of a smaller guy, too, in stature. Again, like from just a fan's point of view, a solid hand in the ring, he could, give you an okay match. But at the end of the day, he was never going to set the world on fire. So I think his position on the card really was never going to be elevated beyond where it was. But I could see you going in there and having a solid match with him to build you up. So it makes sense to me. Yeah,
you could do things if you went in the ring and, people like on television, for example, and you're working with a guy who basically is his role is putting people over everywhere, but on TV especially. The people know you're going to beat him. So how can you have a good match with him? Well, there's a variety of things you can do, and one of them, of course, is to do the big head, the egomaniac that you act just like everybody thinks you should. Like this guy's 2 cents waiting for change. And you're a millionaire and you're just going to eat him up. And you do something where you screw yourself up. And all he has to do is maybe you throw him in the corner and you follow in after him. All you tell him to do is move. And you go through between the top and the second turnbuckle and hit your shoulder on that pole and come bouncing out of there with your arm up, waving your arm like it's broke. Well, then all of a sudden that little guy you've been beating the crap out of, he's got, you're hurt. And then you have the guy make a comeback. Well, you can get a pop out of the people, and you can have the guy punch the crap out of you, and you can sell it, and you can get the guy over in the mat, because it wouldn't be believable if he overpowered you. But by doing something like, again, being an egomaniac or whatever, then you can make a believable match that when you finally do beat him, and then all you have to do at the end, maybe I gave him a shoulder breaker. Instead of pinning him 1-2, I'd pull him up by the hair and give him another one. Well, I get a ton of heat with a guy that's been beat by everybody.
Right.
And I'm not saying like there's anything I did that's brilliant. I learned a lot of stuff from watching other matches, of course.
Sure.
watching the Masters. But, that was just one example of ways that you could make a match interesting. When people say, oh, my God, there's Bob's like Andre the Giant compared to this other guy over there. He's going to kill him. But some way to not just to get a win, but to get some heat, to have some heat ideas to get yourself stronger than you were before you went in there.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you just go ahead and just straight out beat a guy, but you take 5 minutes, they tell you, Bob, we need 8 minutes. It takes you 8 minutes to do it. Well, basically, by the time you beat him, you're weaker than you were before you started the match. I'm going to step aside here just for a second.
Mm-hmm.
When I first went in the Carolinas, Johnny Weaver was booking, and they put me against these guys that a lot of them worked in the office for Old Man Crockett, and there were guys in their 50s, 40s, 50s that were not big. They weren't anything impressive, and that was their job. They were job guys. They'd beat everybody that came in there, beat them. And so when I went out there, I was pretty green when I went in there the first time. I'd only been in the business 2 or 3 years. I remember one match. Weaver wanted me to go 8 minutes. And I go out there, and there's a guy, the top of his head comes up to about my chin. And I don't remember his name. So he pushed me in the ropes, and he hit me with a working punch in the gut. And I guess he expected me to sell it. And, I mean, it looked like crap. And nobody reacted to it. The match had been going for about 10 seconds. I stepped out, scooped him up, and gave him the shoulder breaker and beat him. I beat the match in about 20 seconds. But because if I did anything else, I wasn't going to get over. I mean, I wasn't experienced then, but I knew enough. If I went 8 minutes with this guy, I don't know. And now if it had been reversed and he was an expert and it was me, I would have figured out some way to go 8 minutes with a guy, some young guy coming in, where it was credible. I mean, where it was believable. But this guy apparently didn't have any idea. He takes a guy that's like 60, 70 pounds heavier than him, pushes him. I mean, I backed into the rope. We ended up back, and he hits me with a little shot in the gut, and then he backs away from me. If he'd hit me in the gut, or if he'd break my eye, say, and then pounded on me a little bit, that'd have been different. But he hit me in the gut and he backed away. Well, I'm sorry, nothing left to do, just shoulder breaker. And I did that the first 4 masters I wrestled there. Weaver had me against wasn't the same people, but they were all, I hate to say job guys, but the people in all those towns had seen these guys get beat. Mm-hmm. There were people who had been there for 10 years. But they worked in the office for Old Man Crockett. Mm-hmm. They'd seen these guys get beat 100 times. I don't think they ever saw anyone ever win a match. So, I mean, I go out there and I take 8 minutes to beat somebody like that. Weaver got upset about it, but I'm not upset, but he asked me about it. And I said, well, I didn't see any way to go any longer. Thunderbolt Patterson was there then. We were still buddies. And Jerry Briscoe was there, and both of them were watching my matches. And they both said, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Well, all both said is you're getting over. And that's all I needed to know. Mm-hmm. And that was the aside from, I don't remember where we started.
Well,
Get us back on track.
I'm going to try my best because, for the first time ever, you stumped me. I don't even know where the hell this started. But I will say, as you were telling that, it's kind of the art of getting over a squash match is what you were really explaining here. And getting sympathy on a guy that somebody's seen beaten 400 times in a row on television, still being able to get sympathy out of him and getting people to come behind him and back him up. Mike Jackson is a great example of that. I can't tell you how many times the cocky heel got their ego got the best of them, and Mike was able to land those flying head scissors, those drop kicks, almost get a win every time, in the crowd, no matter how many years he did that. And I do mean years. The fans still bought it. They still ate it up when Mike got those little instances, those little quick spots where he almost got a win. And he was a perfect guy who always seized the day when he was given that opportunity. Other guys would get lost. You would see a heel try to feed the job guy. Hey man, here you go. Here's your opening. And the guy sometimes didn't know what to do with it. And what do you got to do then, Bob? You got to cut him right back off. I gave you your shot, but I'm not going to look like an idiot out here, right? Like so.
You just have to climb. Well, Mike did a wonderful. Mike was a very He's been running his own shows.
Yes.
He got famous from being on TBS getting beat for 10, 20, 15 years, whatever, however many. And he's the one, we talked about him earlier. With him, when I went in with Ole, I worked with him when I was first getting over. I worked with him, I'm pretty sure I worked with him on TV. And then I was the agent for a while. Once we had the Saturday Night Massacre and we went back and I started wrestling again, I worked with him again on TV. And I think in the years I was there, I think I worked with him 3 different times. Well, how do you follow yourself, with this guy that you beat him, I mean, in the most devastating way possible, shoulder breaker, a guy sells it right. He shouldn't be able to get up for, a few minutes anyway, or not, 30 seconds. And if he does, he should be acting like his shoulder's broken. But that was it. Mike was capable of doing that. And it was the same thing, the philosophy I talked about earlier. The heel gets overconfident, cocky, walk around strutting, look at me and all this, and leaves himself open he turns his back on Mike. You slam him, you turn his back, and you walk around strutting. And when you turn around, he drop kicks you right between the eyes. Well, that stuff gets over.
Yeah.
But the heel has to be able to, guys that came in there that had not been watching TV and didn't know Mike's history, that would just try to glom him because he was so small, their win didn't mean anything when they just glommed him, beat the crap out of him, and then beat him. Even if it took 5 minutes, which in a way is an expose and a way of saying, if that heel took 5 minutes to beat the guy that he took over on immediately and was just beating the crap out of for 5 minutes, actually that makes the heel look weak because what took you so long? Now, if you're going to pin him and you pull him up, you don't let the referee count 3, that's one thing. But if you beat on him for 5 minutes, if you were really tough and whatever, like say somebody like Killer Karl Kox, if you're beating and kicking on the guy for 5 minutes, he should look like a big hamburger, just sitting there oozing blood and juice and whatever else. A lot of people didn't think that way, and I was, of course, when I first started, I didn't have that expertise either. But Mike is a success story for the wrestling business, which is nice. There aren't that many.
Mike still works. He's 75 years old, and he averages 1 match a month. And, I'm not talking about he goes in there and throws a punch. There's a video. There's some footage out there. I don't know if it's probably a couple years old now, but footage of Mike Jackson in his 70s walking the top rope, like the spoiler or something. so it's insane. Good genes, I guess, in that family, that Jackson family, to be able to move like that in your mid-70s or whatever it was at the time. But as a fan, and I go back to my youth as a kid watching TV, there were certain enhancement talent guys, job guys, that when you saw it didn't even matter who they were going to work yet. You didn't even know who they were working. They would be announced, you go, oh, this is going to be a good squash match. I can depend on this match to be, even though I didn't understand the business or how it was worked, I still understood certain guys were going to give me a good match. And Mike Jackson was one of those guys, certainly on TV.
Yes.
There's another guy who comes through here in 1983. He's going to go on to become a superstar in the world of pro wrestling in the WWF and WCW. He's going to be a main eventer, one of the top heels, and fondly remembered as one of the greats throughout his run. But back here in 1983, simply a lowly job guy, still well put together, and you work him a couple times here. So I don't know if you have any recollections of working with or being around a young, ravishing Rick Rude.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember Rick. Yeah, he, for some reason, it seemed like to me he was at least knew the Road Warriors.
They were all Minnesota boys.
Were they? Yeah. So he was hanging with them a little bit, and he was the guy looked great. He had a fantastic body. Now he was tall, dark, and handsome. Orndorff wasn't dark. He had blondish hair.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but Rick was. An Adonis, really. He looked great body, nice enough guy. He was quiet at times. Another guy I never rode in a car with, so I didn't get a chance to know him real well. Did I have matches with him?
Yeah, you have at least a couple that I saw here, so that stuck out to me. He comes in as enhancement because he's just breaking into the business. He's one of the many Minnesota boys. There's like a dozen of them. that all went to high school around the same time period. They all worked together as bouncers in the bars up there. It's amazing how many guys actually come from Minnesota. It's insane how many talents came down and made it big. They didn't just break into the business. They all, made it, so to speak, at different levels and things. And Rick Rude's just another one of them. Rick, they used to say he was the one-punch knockout king in real life. You know what I mean? So it's had to be humbling for these guys to realize when you start out, you got to pay your dues. So I'm sure Rude came down and was like, well, why does Hawk and Animal get pushed right out of the gate? But I got to, do the jobs, because he was, for an enhancement guy, Rick Rude from the beginning was pretty well put together.
Oh, yeah. He looked great from immediately. He didn't look like someone to certainly, like, not to knock Mike Jackson, but he certainly wasn't a job. He wasn't anywhere near looking like some kind of job guy. He looked great. Was he was it Joe Stecker up there in Minnesota that trained all those guys?
Eddie Sharkey.
Sharkey, there we go. Yeah, boy, I tell you, he produced some guys. Yeah. And the thing is, Rick should maybe have remembered that Animal had a year in the business where he didn't do jack squat. He didn't make any waves at all.
He went back home. He quit the business, and Oldie had to come back up and get him.
Yeah. So it's not like everybody got that push. The Road Warriors had a very, very happy coincidence of having Bill Watts in Atlanta at the time when they were first going to be pushed on TV.
Right.
Bill and Ole together could, figured out the best way to use those guys.
Right.
The haircuts and the paint and all that was just brilliant. But you can't do that with everybody.
No.
You can't take everybody and have them get over like that, because the Road Warriors, everything we've talked about them in the past. And when I say, well, maybe the person got hurt, you said, oh, they work with the Road Warriors. They got hurt. And you're right. I remember after their first match, they went out there, I think they double clotheslined somebody. And whoever it was did a deal where their feet went up in the air. They did a complete flip and landed on their face. And when they came back afterwards, the job guy, when they came back, they were thrilled. They felt like they had, because it got a hell of a reaction from the audience. What do you think we felt like in the dressing room? At backstage when we saw back where we were watching the TV when that happened. We were thrilled too, because, oh my God, these guys are devastating. Well, the match was real simple. They didn't have to do a whole lot, but what they did was so believable, because for basic purposes, it was real.
It's so funny to look at their schedule when they break in too, because they are murdering people on TV. And there's some guys on these house shows where I'm going, yeah, they probably beat the shit out of those guys too. But then, their first day in the business on the TV taping, they're working Joe Young and Randy Barber. And Randy Barber had done a million jobs on TBS as well. But later that night, their first night on the road, they're working Ronnie Garvin and Ole Anderson. And something tells me they didn't kick their asses just the same there.
Oh, no, they didn't. I bet they had a good match. So, and I'm sure that Ole and Ronnie put them over appropriately or got them over.
Oh yeah, they did the job. They definitely they laid down for him. Ole knew.
Well,
Ole saw money clearly right out of the gate. It's like, okay, no problem.
Yeah. Well, he probably. Ole pretty, and we talked about at length about how smart he was, but I'm not sure even he could see the impact these guys were going to have. Mm-hmm. They had something about them. I'll go back to the roid rage stuff where Animal threw that glass bottle of Gatorade at that old woman in her car because she held us up for, 5 minutes or whatever. It was that kind of attitude those guys projected in the ring. They were always at least irritable at best, outright surly and unfriendly at worst. They were, those roids were hard on you.
Sure.
I told you about trying them myself for a week and finding myself all of a sudden wanting to have temper tantrums. And I said, the heck with that crap. But those guys were doing that stuff. And so I was with them all the time for like 6 months. They exuded that menace. You looked at them, and then you looked at their face. When they were in public, they weren't smiling at anybody. They weren't going, "Hey, how you doing?" They would. They had on. They wore like the bandana type thing over their head when they were out in public. They didn't.
Right.
They did cover their head, but when they looked at people, let's put it this way, they were always on stage. To them, they were like, when they were in public, they worked their gimmick, and that meant if they went into a store, sometimes I told this in the past, they would go in a store and start bickering with each other like they were going to get in a fight, and then all of a sudden you see people putting their stuff down. They were waiting in line to get their stuff paid for. They put their stuff down and leave the place because they were afraid those guys were going to get in a fight and they were going to get killed and just being spectators.
You're stuck between an animal who I liken to a grizzly bear, just a big, burly, just totally, and Hawk, a little leaner, but like a tiger. So you're stuck between a bear and a tiger. Like somebody, which way do you want to die kind of deal, right?
Yeah. In public, Joe was again surly, and he usually had a glower on his face. I know Hawk would be more friendly, but not when they were on stage. And like I say, in public, outside on the way back from a town, we stopped. Like say in Macon, we stopped slow. We're still in Macon. Those roids were pushing them so bad they had to eat, and you never stop after a wrestling match before you get home. But we had to stop. I was carrying them, and they said, "We got to eat." Anyway, we stopped at a restaurant, and we were the only people in there because it was like 11:30 at night. There was this poor old woman who had something wrong with one of her legs. She was limping. Those guys were surly and nasty. I mean, they didn't call her any names or anything, but they didn't say please or thank you or any of that. They were working their gimmick just like if they were in front of 10,000 people on television. That's the one, again, I'll repeat. After they ordered, they were so surly with their order. I ordered a box of cereal unopened and a thing of milk unopened for my meal because I knew back in the kitchen, those guys were going to get a bunch of stuff being put in their food. So anyway, but yeah, that's just, think about it. You're up there, maybe in Minnesota up there, maybe you're a bar bouncer or whatever, and you're making, I don't know, a couple $100 a week. And all of a sudden, a month later, you're making $1,500, $2,000 a week. Wow. I mean, think about what it would do to you, especially guys that weren't used to being wealthy. And not just that, but being known everywhere. Right. Everywhere you go, people are looking at you and like, oh, and if they don't know who you are, they want to know who you are. If they don't already know.
They know you're something.
So, yeah. And I always respected those guys because of all the work they put in to get that big. You can't get that big without it. And now they took shortcuts and they paid for it. They paid for it with their longevity of their lifetimes. But boy, I tell you, they took a big risk and it cost them, but it paid off because they did. They looked the part, and they were. I mean, they weren't bodybuilders. I mean, they did that, yes, but they were strong guys too. They were very strong guys. So they were exceptional.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of the Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
We've got, many times they were a tag team. They were a brother duo out of Columbus, Georgia. I don't know if you have much memory of them. Ted and Jerry Oates.
Yeah, both of them. Jerry, I knew Jerry because I don't know why, maybe I'd been on some cards with him. Nice guy. And then I met Ted there, and I liked him. I don't remember exactly in what context, but he was kind of fun in the dressing room and had a good sense of humor, and they were good. They were a good tag team. Both of them were good workers. They didn't have, I don't want to say they didn't have that factor. They didn't have that if you look at them, I mean, you could look at either one of them, and yeah, they're nice looking guys, or especially not Ted, but Jerry. And a tall, nice looking guy, but they weren't strikingly handsome. They weren't like a Rick Rude or a Jack Briscoe, where they're just very, very cosmetically attractive. And also their demeanor was such, they didn't strut around. They weren't walking around like a lot of guys did with that kind of look at me type walk, strutting or, Ric Flair type stuff, wanting to be noticed. Again, I was out of the business completely for so long. I don't know what happened after I retired. I don't know if either one of them ever got a big break, but they were nice guys. They were good to have on the card.
Right.
When I was running shows, it was nice to have them there because I knew they would have a good match. They could do whatever I wanted to, or only wanted them to do. To my knowledge, good people. I mean, I never heard anything
right.
untoward, like messing around with underage girls or anything like that. Yeah, good guys.
No, they had a long run in wrestling, but their claim to fame really was just working in Kansas City and then here in Georgia. They're Columbus, Georgia boys, and so Fred Ward would, especially in the earlier years, would utilize them on top a lot in Columbus because they were over in their hometown, and again, Columbus had its own TV, right? So at one point, so they would get to do a little more on that TV. They would do more at the houses. They would headline a lot. They would, get the bigger matches, at least earlier at the beginning of the 1980s and whatnot with the Oates brothers. Now, later on, when Ole loses half his roster, once Vince takes over TBS, Ted Oates gets the big call to come in and turn heel. He's going to do a Hollywood Blondes gimmick with Rip Rogers there, working as a tag team for Ole. So he's going to get a chance to shine as a heel. But typically they were just there. They were just another couple of faces on the card, but they were solid in what they did in the ring. They were good workers. Good solid workers. When did they do the tag team thing for Ole? What year? 85, 84. It would have been after Vince did his deal, so not too long after that. Maybe the summer of 84, something like that.
Maybe that's the part where I got to know got to know Ted better.
Okay.
Because I didn't see him very much, and I'm also happy to know that they were being featured in Columbus, because everybody likes to have a star turn, even if it's just for one town. You're not over everywhere, you're not being featured everywhere, but they knew what it felt like to be main event. And obviously they drew, or he wouldn't have kept putting them on top.
Isn't it funny how that works? So I'm from Atlanta, you're from Columbus, and so you're okay. People like you in Atlanta, but when you come to Columbus, they love you because you're from our hometown. That's how much more. Now you're working the Freebirds in the main event versus the second match on the card in Atlanta. That's crazy, the change that happens there.
Yeah, well, there were another brother teams, Ron and Don Wright, who were okay in Knoxville, but in Johnson City, where they lived, wherever it was, Frankfort, Johnson City, those guys were over because they were over in public. They had been fighting and scrapping in public their whole life.
Right.
Both of them had knife slashes on them, all kinds of stitches and things from fights, and no bullet holes. But
and that was just from their wives. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a good one. Yeah, but that's good to know. I'm glad they had a chance to be the main event and all that.
Right.
Oh, I know what I wanted to go back just for a second.
Sure.
Working with Tito, you say I was working with him and he was doing jobs for me after he did a program with Ivan Putski.
They were tag team champions up in New York prior to this run, yeah.
See, you didn't have cable TV then.
Right.
It was only in Atlanta. I had no idea that Tito had that guy. And then it wouldn't have made any difference, except that maybe I would have appreciated more of him doing a job for me. I kind of thought, I knew he was fairly new to the business. Mm-hmm. I appreciated it. I mean, anybody that, did a job for me, I appreciated it. But, as a heel, I got beat most of the time. I would get ones on TV, and then I'd go out and do jobs in all the towns. And that was my job. I was a heel. That was the way. I mean, I enjoyed losing, and if I lost in a way that got heat, and really, I mean, where I got heat on myself and I got somebody over. I enjoyed that. That was my job. A lot of guys, we talked about Paul Orndorff, and not to knock Paul, but we put him over like $1 million with the Atlas story. He hated to get beat, even when he was a heel. And,
sure. We've definitely talked about that.
Yeah. So it's like, wait a minute, Paul, are you sure you're in the same business I'm in? Well, you want to win, you got to be a babyface, I guess. Even then, you're going to lose occasionally. But I feel more regard for Tito than I already had, which was a lot.
Right.
For him, and never complaining or showing. I mean, his matches were good, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah, Tito was, a great worker in the ring. So I'm sure those matches are really fun to watch, you and Tito every night. And they were doing that for a reason. You would just come in and they were building you up because within a matter of months, you're going to go into a program with Ronnie Garvin. And Ron's going to go over every night. So it was really all about getting Ron over. Plus, that's where you start moving into that agent or that backstage guy as well to a degree. So it all makes sense. It all ties in. But I go back and I'm starting to look at a lot of names trickling in here after you arrive. Ron Garvin, Pez Whatley. We know Rip Rogers will eventually be here. How much of a part did you play in maybe name dropping some of these guys to Ole? Because I see a lot of ICW talent starting to trickle in after you.
All of them.
Okay.
When I left the Papos, we haven't talked about them much, but when I left them, I didn't have any grudge or revenge, but I'd been at the lowest of the low working for them.
Right.
And so we needed a baby face or two. I called Ronnie. He was still working for him. He was still working for the Papos. I called him. I said, hey, man, we got a room for you. We got a spot for you on top. Give your notice, man. Get in here. And he did. And I think I told him.
Do you remember if Ronnie jumped at it or did he say, I got to go think about this kind of deal?
Oh, no. He jumped at it because, he was, you're going to be TBS,
Right.
I'm
going to be a main eventer, babyface on a superstation.
You're going to be working in Atlanta Coliseum as opposed to Frankfurt,
Lexington,
Kentucky. Yeah, Lexington. Yeah. A little spot shows up in the mountain somewhere. You got to drive 400 miles. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He jumped. I mean, Ronnie was always professional and still is, for that matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was happy. Ronnie and I were real tight at the time, and I was happy to be able to get him out of there.
Right.
I didn't have a beef against the Papos, but Angelo Papo was so annoying that it didn't bother me at all. Well, like I told you, when I went to get the money, I took a baseball bat and a box cutter with me. They owed me about $5,000, and I was worried about getting it.
Right.
So I went to his house to get it. I went armed because I thought they might, I had no idea what they might do.
This wrestling business is a crazy world, I tell you.
Yeah. Well,
it's like, can you imagine somebody having to take a baseball bat up there to get their last paycheck at McDonald's? I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, it's just crazy.
Now, Ronnie had worked there long enough. I left there. I'd already spent a year with Watts.
Right.
Ronnie was still up there with the Papos. And then I'd been in with Ole for, I don't know, maybe a year. You'd have to look and see when Ronnie started in Atlanta.
It was several months for sure.
Yeah, and so he'd been up there all the time. When he went to leave, he had earned $30,000 worth of stock in the company.
Ooh.
They were taking out, I don't know, $200. I think $200 or $300 a week out of the paycheck to buy stock. He had 5%, I think, of Papo's promotion. So when he went to get his money, did I tell a story?
I believe so, but have at it.
Okay. I asked you the first time, after again. Remember the guy Gary I mentioned? I can't think of his last name.
The Italian Stallion story.
Stallion, yeah. Stallion had to go, went with Ronnie to get his money. Ronnie waited out in the living room. Stallion went back in the bedroom or somewhere, kitchens and bathroom, I don't know, somewhere, with Angelo, because Angelo started giving Ronnie stall jobs. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Check will be in the mail.
Check's in the mail, right?
Yeah. So Ronnie knew better than that. He'd never see that money. So I don't know what to say. And I'd love to ask Gary what he said to Angelo, but Angelo came out and gave him. I think he gave. I doubt it very seriously if he had $30,000 in cash, but he gave him a check, and it didn't bounce. So
right.
Yeah. So and that was great. Ronnie earned that money 10 times over.
Yeah.
He was their star.
Yeah,
Randy Savage was a good hand, but nobody knew who he was. And he got over up there, and he was a draw too. But Ronnie had been around a while. He was known all over the country. So he came in. Pez, I don't remember exactly if he called me or not, but I know that if he came looking for work, Pez and I used to room together on the road, just to say, because we were paid so little,
right?
It was hard to get your own room.
It is interesting. You can see Pez and Garvin. That's what really what led me to put two and two together. I noticed Garvin and Pez arrived right around the same time, and so I figured maybe you had something to do with that. But that says a lot about what Ole thought of you to just say, Ole, I got some guys, and he said, bring them in, let's get them going, or what? To just that fast. I'm sure Ole knew who Ronnie Garvin was. I don't know how much he knew about Pez Whatley by this point, but no, it's interesting, and that's why I just said, wait a minute, that's kind of peculiar that they both arrived right around the same time. So I thought maybe you might have had a hand in that. That's really cool that you were able to bring some of the boys in and get them paid, man, here in Georgia on TBS, no less, the Superstation. That's pretty damn cool. And I noticed here as we hit into the summer, Bob, your role changes because you're wrestling a lot less, which leads me to believe that you're beginning to, work for Ole and other means behind the scenes. But also you're beginning to put talent over, but not just any talent, a lot of the newcomers, the up-and-comers, the youngsters. You're putting over Pez Whatley. You're putting over Bruno Jr., so Bruno's son, David Sammartino. You're putting over Brett Wayne Sawyer, who had just arrived as well. So you're starting to you're still getting some wins here and there, but more often than not, and again, your matches are more sporadic because you're not working every single town, but you're beginning to put all these new guys over. You're building the new stars of Georgia.
Right. Well, that was part of my job, and I did know the ropes. We talked about Paul Orndorff not realizing that Bill Watts could, beat him every night for 2 years, and then the very first week after that could make him a superstar again,
right?
Even after 2 years of doing jobs, because all you have to do is have that television and have the ability to put a guy on there and make him look like Godzilla. Yeah, I knew that my name meant something. So when I was doing jobs for these guys, it meant something. And my job was to get them over so they would draw for the company. So I did the best job I could to do that, to get them over. Plus, I liked Ronnie. I liked Pez. But I would have done it for someone I didn't like. I might not have been as happy about doing it, but that was my job. If you're a heel, your job is to go out there and he definitely get some heat, or have some heat somehow, so that by the time the guy beats you, he beats somebody. Again, I knew no matter what I did, if I'd have gone out there and done jobs for a year, Ole could have made me back within a month, put me on TV and had me do certain things. Just maybe not beat Andre the Giant or anything, but, I'll give you an example. Back in Mid-South, I did a thing where in the very first part of the show, I did a job right in the middle of the ring for a dog or somebody. At the end of the show, I came out from somewhere and attacked somebody doing an interview or something. Mm-hmm. I had more heat after that than I had. They forgot all about the job I did.
Right.
I had all my heat back, plus some. And that was Watts, of course. And that's what I mean by saying that, the producer of the TV, the one who's telling people what to do, or making the scene, that's the guy that, and Bill Watts had proven many times over that he was good at it. He got me over. One of my first matches was Super Destroyer. Was that Scott?
That was your first match, yeah, Scott Irwin. That's where you win the Louisiana title.
You want to know what he did in the finish? Did I tell a story?
Yeah, we talked about that on the Mid-South episode.
Well, I'll tell it just briefly.
Sure.
Scott had this finish, superplex. You'd be up on the turnbuckle. He would stand on the second rope and facing you, and you would be facing the center of the ring. He'd have his back. Well, he'd suplex you off that thing, the superplex.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It looked like it killed you. I mean, you way up in the air, you land out in the middle of the ring. So it looked like it'd kill Andre. So he did it to me. 1-2, I kicked out. He went to do it again, and somehow I switched it, and I suplexed him off the top rope and beat him. And that was Bill Watts. And that got me over like $1 million because, nobody kicked out of that hold, that finish.
Right.
Yet, I doubt if he ever did it to Dog, the Junkyard Dog. But so, that's what I'm saying about the person. And of course, as a booker, when I was the one, when I had Bill Watts' role, I did that with a lot of people too. You could beat a guy in the first match, squash him, have him helped out of there, and then have him do something, run in the main event or do something later or on TV. And that's the other thing. Whatever you do in a house show, it doesn't matter. It does matter, but you want the house show. You want to please the fans in the house show. Leave them with something where nobody leaves pissed off to the point of saying, well, hell with this stuff, I'm never coming back. But you want them pissed off, maybe. Or you want some heat. But to say, yeah, I can, well, I'm can hardly wait till next week to see Roop or whoever get his ass kicked. But, so you want to have heat. But you could go on TV where it was safe. You didn't, if you try to, if somebody's Mother's Day and you're in the arena and mom comes down the ring and you give her a shoulder breaker, you're risking your life. You got all those fans out there got a mother. That's one thing all of them got. And you just crippled somebody's mother. It's usually a female wrestler pretending to be somebody's. I never shoulder break anybody's real mother, at least not anybody that wasn't a wrestler. They were always female wrestlers, but you could do it on TV, and there weren't 5,000 people wanting to kill you. You're walking down the aisle, back down
some
the
angles
aisle.
are better done just in that TV studio. It's a lot easier to with the security there. I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, that's why I never worried about getting beat anywhere. Okay. I always knew that Ole would encourage me to come up with ways to make myself stronger on TV. I mean, if I had a suggestion, he was open to it, but he could do it on his own. He knew how to get people over.
Right.
So, okay, let's move on.
Yeah, well, so I'm scrolling through results here for 1983, and I happen to notice there's a week of shows where you team up with the Road. They're in the business for a month at this point together, Hawk and Animal. It's Bob Roop teaming with the Road Warriors. Lucky you that you're a heel, so you're on their side of things. And you guys are going over on a trio of Arn Anderson, who was kind of the odd man out. Matt Bourne leaves, and Arn just kind of flounders after that for a little bit anyways. Obviously going to go on to have a decent career after this, to say the least. But it's Roop and the Road Warriors over Arn Anderson, Brett Wayne, and a young Barry Darsow, who here is Man Mountain Darsow. He would go on to do Crusher Khrushchev, the Russian sympathizer. Later, he was Smash of Demolition in the WWF, and he's also another Minnesota boy who knew Hawk and Animal, Rick Rude and company. Do you have any memories of Barry Darsow coming through here or ever interacting with him?
I think I saw him a few years ago. I went to a thing not far from Michigan. I went to a thing for a weekend. It was for a guy asked me to come down for something like asthma or some kind of a disease that he was trying to raise money for. Mm-hmm. And I remember, One Man Gang was there, and Bill Eadie was there. Who was Eadie's partner?
It was Darsow. Darsow was
there. Yeah, Darsow was there. That's where I saw him. Yeah, and I didn't know him very well. Okay. I knew Bill a lot better. I worked with Bill a bunch of times. But I got to talk to Darsow for, we were there all day. So I got to see him there. And he seemed, he was a nice guy. He was a friendly guy. Now, of course, we're there for a charitable purpose and all that. But, I mean, I have instincts about people. Maybe it's just experience, but he seemed like a good guy.
Yeah.
I liked him. As far as ever being on the road with him, riding down the road, no.
Yeah, but, he was just here for, this is really early in his career, so he was just passing through, but he was a big boy who was trying to learn at the time. And I think it's Bill Watts that really gave him his first real big run in the business. He would go on to Crockett and be successful there in a Russian gimmick with Ivan Koloff. They paired him with Ivan for a while, so he really learned the business through Ivan, at least how to work and work as a heel in a tag team or whatever. And he would go on to have a hell of a run working for the WWF after that. So, yeah, but at this point, I figured that might be a name you weren't too familiar with because, again, he's just passing through pretty quickly here in the summer of 83. Another name that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, Terry Taylor. Do you have any memories of Terry?
Yeah, Terry was a little bit of a puzzle to me. He was he was obviously intelligent. He wasn't real big, but he was good in the ring. He was a very good worker. I don't remember, he was a guy that I never got a chance to really get close to. He was quiet, at least around me, and he gave me the impression of someone who was able to work behind the scenes to try to promote himself. He always seemed to be, wherever I was at, he always seemed to be figured in a little bit, where he was getting a push. I did, again, after I retired, a lot of these guys had the main part of their career, the successful part, came after I retired, where I didn't see or even know about any of it.
Right.
Did he go on to have a big career?
Yeah, Terry was pretty successful for himself. He was on top in all the territories. Bill Watts gave him the UWF title in '86, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He was on top for a little bit in Dallas when it was, in the dying years, but he worked for the WWL, and then there was the WWF, where I guess Vince had it out for him. He made him a fucking rooster. I mean, literally made him a fucking rooster, and he made him crow. And
man.
Yeah, that happened. And then they say his career never resurrected from that. He went back to work for WCW for a while, but literally from, I'd say, 1990 through today, he's been in the business. I mean, he went back and forth working behind the scenes, doing all sorts of things between the WWF and WCW repeatedly throughout the 90s, all the way into the demise of WCW. Somebody out there will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm 99% sure right now he's down there in the offices of their developmental NXT right now working for WWE. So Terry's still got a job in the business.
Well, good for him. He gave me that impression of being smart enough and diplomatic enough and cagey enough. I was going to say treacherous, but that's not the right word.
Well, that might be the right word. There's a lot of people that don't seem to care for Terry. There's a lot of people that have a lot of things, and it's not because, well, it's exactly the way you describe him: cagey, diplomatic, but also political and things like that. And so Terry's the kind of guy you don't hear a lot of bad stories about, but he just rubbed everybody the wrong way, I guess is the best way I can describe it. So I was a fan of Terry Taylor as a kid growing up. I liked watching him wrestle. He was always a solid guy in the ring. He had great matches. But, when you hear the guys tell the stories from behind the scenes, he had a lot of people that weren't big fans of him.
Well, I'm not real surprised to hear that. He, again, maybe one of the reasons that we didn't, I don't want to say hit it off, but we didn't get close was that, and maybe games he might be playing, whatever, if he's trying to, use people for his own purposes, he wasn't going to try with me, or I don't know, maybe it might have been my shooter image. He didn't want me pissed off at him, although he didn't have to worry about it. I wouldn't have ever done anything to him. What can I say? If he likes his work, well, good. He's making money, good. But from what I knew of the wrestling business has changed completely since I was in it. Mm-hmm. But if it was part of the road generation and you were still going down the road at age 60 or 70, in my mind, you're a failure, even if you're getting paid every night, because there's no kind of life. Your job owns you, and it takes up most of your day. And now you say, well, that's the same with most people, Bob. They have to work 40 hours a week. Well, we work more than 40 hours usually. I mean, the thing is, generally, with a regular job, you're home in the morning and say good morning to your kids before they go to school, and you're home in the evening, maybe sometimes by the time they get home from school, or certainly thereafter, maybe have dinner with them. But when you're a wrestler, if you can do that 2 days a week, you're lucky. The rest of the time you're gone. So, in other words, the wrestling business is very hard on our personal lives. It takes everything it can in order to be successful at it. And also, what you're talking about in terms of that being calculating and cagey, if the object is to get ahead of someone else, now that goes in every line of work. Someone who's a junior executive wants to become a senior executive, and if somehow they got their boss fired so they could take their place, I'm not saying they do it on purpose, but if it did happen, they wouldn't be overcome with sadness because of it, because they're getting a promotion. So that's going on everywhere. But in the wrestling business, a lot of times the way people got ahead was by telling stories and denigrating other guys, telling bad stories about them, and having it get spread around to get back to the office. Mm-hmm. There were even people back in my day, back in the Road generation, who actually went into the office and told stories. But once they were found out, or once it was learned, their name was just crap with the boys. So I don't know Terry well enough to make any judgments in that sense. The fact that he's still working, I guess, if he obviously wants to, he's done well, isn't he?
Do you remember working with or being around Killer Tim Brooks at all?
Might have worked a tag team with as a tag partner, but he was a good guy, good talent. Another guy that now he might have, again, going back to my complete removal from the business. What happened after I retired, I don't know, but I never saw Tim get a push on top. Just him, like single angle with anybody. Now, just like I didn't know about Tito working with Putski in New York,
right?
I didn't know. I didn't know. Again, if you weren't on TBS, very seldom did you know what was going on in the rest of the country. So I don't know what kind of success he had, but you know what? He was a decent guy. He was pleasant to be around. When you mention his name, I get a feeling of regard.
Fondness?
Fondness. There you go. That's a good word.
Yeah.
I get a feeling of fondness. He was one of the boys. Wasn't a stooge. He stand-up guy. He was heel when I saw him working as a heel. He had guts. He'd do hot finishes and fight his way out of there if he had to. So
he looked tough. He had that look, and he.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, he looked rangy, boy.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah, good guy.
That's cool.
Is he still around?
Looks like he passed away in 2020.
Oh well, he got that's a pretty long. How did you say how old he was?
He was 73 at the time of his passing.
That's young.
Oh, it looks like he served in the Army in the Vietnam War as well. So he had some life experience.
Oh man. Well, my hat's off to him. Those poor guys got denigrated because the war was unpopular in this country. But a lot of them were drafted, or if they did sign up, they went over there and put their life at risk, representing this country's policy. It's turned out in retrospect that policy was seriously flawed. We had no business being there. I was in the service from 62 to 65. The war didn't really kick in until after I got out. I was so glad that I didn't make it there. One of my buddies on the wrestling team got drafted. He dropped out of school and he got drafted. And he was over there for 2 years, and he came back to college. In fact, he wrestled after he got back. He had some stories to tell that were just just sent chills up and down your spine.
Yeah.
Of being out these places and people attacking in the middle of the night and throwing satchel charges into your tent area and all this stuff. And, you look in history, a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people that you saw, those Vietnamese soldiers, everybody thought, because they all were usually dressed about the same, everybody thought, oh, well, those guys are probably maybe they were taxi drivers or street sweepers or whatever. No. Some of those people were mechanical engineers, presidents of schools. They all had, highly trained. Their country was being invaded, and they were fighting against it. And so, yeah, we were really wrong to be there, and I don't want to piss anybody off. Anybody that did serve, my hat's off to you. I consider you a loyal American, and you did what you were asked to do. That whole thing is a black mark on our national record in my mind.
Yeah,
but
there's people with strong opinions about Vietnam going both ways, obviously, and that's nothing wrong with having an opinion, guys. So that's what it is. But I just want to get back to Brooks just for a moment. You talked about where he was on the card. He did, he was a traveler. He was pretty well traveled. He worked Puerto Rico, Montreal, but way back in the early part of his career, he worked up here in Cleveland, Detroit. He worked against all the guys from that era. he did an angle, if I remember correctly. It had to have been while you were there. I'm not saying you should remember these angles, especially ones that don't involve you, but there was an angle, I believe in 83, where he wins the national heavyweight title. This is like after Orndorff leaves or whatever. And he sells the belt to Larry Zbyszko. So Zbyszko becomes the champion by purchasing the title, and then they put it up vacant. They do a tournament, and Larry wins it anyway or something. I think that's how it shook out. But yeah, so Killer Brooks sold the championship. That's like what he's known for here in Georgia at this point in time. And so,
good.
That's a good angle. Yeah, WWF would steal it a few years later. The $1 Million Man would buy the title from Andre and hold it up in a tournament. Wow. Sounds familiar, guys, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they all get repeated. Shakespeare said there were only, I think, 27 or 28 basic plots. He wrote about everything. He said there's only 28 basic plots in existence that you can deal. If you covered all 28, there's no more to cover. So that one in wrestling, I never heard. I don't remember that one with Tim Brooks selling it to who did he sell it to?
Zbyszko, I believe.
Oh, I don't remember that.
But yeah, just one of the many random angles going on in this era. But we're going to have more of them next week. We got tons more to talk about. Arn Anderson, Dutch Mantell, Bill Irwin, Steve-O. I don't know if you remember Steve-O. Sweet Brown Sugar Skip Young. You work with him some. Tim Horner. You're going to put over Tim Horner. You're going to have, well, I guess we can call it a feud. Some lights out matches with Nick Patrick, who had been a referee prior. Nick's going to have a little work here. He's the son of the assassin, Jody Hamilton. And you're going to work with Nick Patrick here as well. So the spoiler Don Jardine comes through, Ox Baker coming through, lots of random names still to get to here.
Yeah, have we talked about Jody Hamilton at all?
I know we've talked about him in passing in the past. I don't know that we've spent a lot of time on Jody, but I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. Oh
yeah, he was a very interesting guy. When I was there with Ole, at the time there was a guy who was going around murdering women. He would wait apparently at some place. A woman driving alone would stop, and he would open the back door and get in and put a gun in the back of their head or whatever. And he ended up murdering these people. And Jody got so upset about it. Now, Jody weighed about 320 pounds at the time. Jody said, I don't know if he ever did it or not, but he said he was going to put on a dress and a hat and drive around.
Yeah, I do remember you telling that story. Yeah.
Oh, did I?
It was a long time ago. Yeah, I remember that. That would have been something. And it would have been even better in a mask. Just a wig and a mask. Yeah. That would have been just phenomenal.
I was going to say, well, Jody, I don't know your size. You take up most of the front seat all by yourself. I'm not sure anybody, unless he's got a machine gun, I'm not sure some guy, he might let you go by and wait for somebody a little less formidable. But did I tell the Ray Stevens, Jody story?
I don't remember.
They were coming back from, Jody was driving. Ray Stevens was sitting in the front seat. Frenchy Bernard and one of the Samoans were in the back seat. And they were back there in the back seat. They had a cooler full of ice, and they were drinking with glasses, like not plastic cups, but actual glasses. Mm-hmm. They were drinking rum and Coke. And they're on their way back from Jacksonville. Jody got some unbelievable, but amazing stories about the kind of heat he and Tom Renisto used to get.
Right.
He talks about leaving town at 90 miles an hour more than like about 3 or 4 times a week. Anyway, this guy in a truck pulls up alongside him, and he's giving him the finger and all this. They just shined him on, or I don't know if they gave him the finger back or what. The guy shows him a gun. So he shows him the gun, and that changed everything. When Jody saw that, he started looking for his gun, and all of a sudden, blam, a gun goes off. And when it does, the guys in the back seat they drop their glasses into the cooler, and it sounds like something hitting glass. Jody assumes that the guy in the truck has now, even though it should be obvious there should be a hole in the windshield, he's assuming that the guy shot at him. So he takes off after he's got a gun. Stevens has got a gun. So they take off after this guy. They chase him to the next little town. They're shooting at him out the window. They're shooting at this guy in the truck. And
like a movie.
Yes. Oh, it's totally unbelievable. So they get into this little town. This guy has to drive down alleys and back behind markets and through marts and all that to get away from them. They're trying to catch him. And finally, he got away somehow. And they go on home. So Jody gets home and, they talk about, blah, man, that guy was crazy and all that. And so the next morning, Jody was cleaning out his car or something. And he looked down, and in the passenger seat, there was a hole in the seat. And when he looked in the hole, he could see the ground because there's a hole all the way through the seat in the ground. Mm-hmm. What had happened was that when they saw the gun, Ray Stevens had a gun in a holster on his waist, and when he went to pull it out, it actually went off. He fired his own pistol. He almost blew his own junk off. And he blew a hole through the seat and down. And Jody and everybody else, the guys in the back seat were hiding behind the seat, so they weren't going to get shot. So Jody came. We had interviews the next day, and Jody came in and told the story. And Ray Stevens, he did blush. He turned all red and everything. But I mean, I think it's a funny story.
Hell yeah.
But that poor bastard in the truck. He thought, well, God, all I did was show him a gun.
Right. Well, you shouldn't be doing that either. But I totally get it.
No. Yeah.
Shouldn't be showing a gun unless you're planning on using it, and you shouldn't even be doing that. But yeah, it's he pulled up to the wrong car.
Yeah. So
always the storyteller, leave them wanting more is how it works, and that was a great way to end this episode. That was a fun story. Any story involving Ray the Crippler Stevens usually ends with some sort of laughter. So what a guy. I tell you, when he was a legend when I was in the business, and he was still working. Yes.
And I remember Steve Kern and I had this angle going from the thing where I called his dad a coward.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was hot as it could be. And we were in Tallahassee. We had a lumberjack match, and Ray was on the card, and he was one of the lumberjacks. And after the match was over, all he said was, "Good match, Bobby." And I'm telling you, it was like getting an Oscar because it was from Ray Stevens.
Yeah.
He was known as one of the best workers in the business ever.
Yeah.
And as a heel and a baby face. And to get that from him, man, I tell you, what a great feeling. Like I say, it's like getting...
it's like a badge of honor, man.
Oh, man, yes. I tell you. Oh, yeah. It's one thing some guy who's a rookie says, oh, well, it was a good match. But someone like Ray, oh, yeah. I love that. He was a good guy, too. He was a lot of fun. He never took liberties with his own reputation. He was a fun guy. He liked to have fun. I remember another story about him, the one with him and Billy Robertson up in Minneapolis, where Billy got stiff with him in the ring. And when he got back in the dressing room, Ray walked up to him and said, "Robertson," he said, "I worked 78 days last year, and I made $103,000. He said, if you ever get stiff with me again, I'm never going to work with you again." And I like that because that's the way to do it. But yeah, good guy. That's a good guy to end our session with.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. Hopefully we'll have more stories from Ray as they pop up in your mind over the course of the episodes to come. But for this week, we are going to wrap things up. Bob, I want to thank you again for doing it. And I'm glad to hear you're doing better. And I'm looking forward to covering some more names next week.
Well, thank you, Ray. And I want to repeat, I do this every week. I just want to repeat, Ray Russell has a path that he is planning for us to go down for this whole show. And I manage to get off the path probably about every 5 minutes. So please, if you you think, God, I wish you'd stick to the subject, don't blame Ray. It's all on me. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way my mind works. And when these stories come up, I feel like telling them. So anyway, thank you out there for listening and putting up with my peculiarities. And Ray, thank you very much for making it all happen, my friend. You're the best.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week, guys. Another Wrestling Stoop on the way.